Hi everyone and welcome to Pam's vlog, and today we are going to revisit meatballs. Boy, do we ever have to address meatballs again. Thank you to Sharon, who is also a viewer on our Facebook page, for posing the question through Messenger that said, could you please answer all of the many questions about the meatballs? And I thought, what questions is she talking about? So I went back to our list of questions, and on our end, when we hit comments, it brings in the comments from all of our 130 videos, all in one great big long list. And there are some days when we have well over 100, in fact, a couple of hundred questions to answer. So I went back to that list and I didn't see anything on meatballs. So I responded to her that I hadn't seen anything. And then I got to thinking, I maybe better check just the comments under the meatball video to see what is there. So I did that, and oh my gosh, there were lots and lots of questions, mostly about two different things. Jim and I were talking about this last night, and I'll tell you, we were just thrilled that members of our community are comfortable enough to ask me questions about my process and procedure that they have wonderings about that seem to conflict with other things that I have said. We love that. We're both professors. We spend half our lives helping students answer their own questions, and I am never ever offended by a question that is respectful. I do not appreciate snarkiness or rudeness in terms of questions. I won't even answer those, I just delete them. So thank you for your many, many wonderful, good questions about the process of meatballs. You know, sometimes I get so excited about doing things that I forget that I need to take a step back and explain some of the things that I'm doing that may be interpreted as being counter to what I usually preach, which is safety, 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 and following USDA guidelines. And so I answered a few of those questions. I pinned one to the top, and then I just realized I need to do an follow-up on the meatballs to answer people's questions. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to address two things that cover most of the questions. One, what about the ingredients in the meatballs that are on the do not can list from USDA? And two, how exactly did I do the canning process? So we're going to go over to my makeshift whiteboard, since you know I'm a professor and I like to stand in front of a whiteboard to explain things, only this is not a whiteboard, it's a white door. It's the door to my pantry. And I'm going to take you through the ingredients list on the back of the meatballs package, and we're going to talk about those ingredients. Then we'll come back here and talk about the canning instructions, the canning process that I actually did. So I'm going to meet you over there at the white door. So whenever I can something that has been commercially prepared, I always check the list of ingredients, and the meatballs were no exception. Before we get into the actual list of ingredients, which is right here, we have to understand the order of parentheticals, parentheses. In other words, when someone makes a statement, like I could say, my name is Pam, and in parentheses I could say wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. So anything in those parentheses would be parenthetical to my name, Pam. So it's related to the thing that butts right up against the parentheses. But what if there's parentheses within parentheses within parentheses? Now, if you're familiar with math, that is not a strange occurrence, because it is the parentheticals, the parentheses, that help you understand the order of operations when you are doing a math problem. So I have them right here on this paper. So the highest order is the regular parentheses, open parentheses, close parentheses. If we need to put a parenthetical inside the parentheses, the next thing we would use is brackets, because you don't put parentheses inside parentheses. These are brackets. They're square like a brick. Again, open bracket, close bracket. And then, heaven forbid, if we have a parenthetical inside the bracket, we will use the braces, and these are the curly Q parentheses marks. The reason I'm showing you all three levels, and there are no more levels, at least that I know about, is that we have all three of those in our list of ingredients. So I'm going to show you how that works, and when you read a list of ingredients, the things that you need to consider about whether or not you feel like it is safe for canning. So here is our list. The list here starts with beef. Now, By FDA regulation, ingredients have to be listed in the order that has the most ingredient, followed by the next most ingredient, followed by the next most ingredient. So there is more beef in those meatballs than there is anything else. Then the second ingredient is water. And there is more water in this recipe for meatballs than there is any of the other ingredients below it. And then number 3 is seasoning. And here we have our first parentheses. So here's our open parentheses right here, and I have blue breadcrumbs. So that is a parenthetical. So seasoning, in other words, the seasoning, and I read about FDA seasoning and what they will accept for seasonings, and this is all according to the regulations, so it's okay. So the first piece of the seasoning is breadcrumbs. Oops, we have another parenthetical and we're to the bracket level. So the breadcrumbs consist of enriched bleached wheat flour, and that is consisted of, here's another parenthetical, this list of things. Now, the niacin, the reduced iron, the thiamine, all of these other things, minute amounts. And then we're back to the bracket level, which is salt, durum flour, soybean oil, shortening, leavening, and there's another parenthetical. The leavening consists of these things in green. Then we're back to the bracket level, some more ingredients of the breadcrumbs, and then we're back to the blue level, which is part of the seasoning. So in addition to breadcrumbs, which is all of this inside this red box, there are these things that are in blue. And then we get to Parmesan cheese, and here's another parenthetical. The Parmesan cheese is part skim milk, cow's milk, cultures, salt, enzymes. Now we're back to the blue, which is we're back to the ingredients in seasonings. So we have this level, and here, then this says seasoning again within this level, which includes this everything in yellow. And then the last of the seasoning ingredients are dehydrated parsley and spice extracts, and that's it. Then there's this little statement that calls the attention of anyone who might be allergic to these two things, that yes, this includes wheat and soy, and you don't need to look through here to find them, just trust us that they are there. So let's reason through this. So essentially, the meatballs have 3 ingredients: beef, water, and seasoning. And then all of this, here's the open parentheses, here is the closed parentheses. So this whole section right here, everything that is highlighted, is all considered part of the seasoning. All right, now we're going to go back over to the other part of the kitchen. So when I looked at this list of ingredients for the meatballs, I knew immediately that these were going to be okay to can, because the order of beef, water, and then the seasonings, and then as it progresses down, there's less and less and less and less amounts of all of these things until there is, and if we just look at the blue, breadcrumbs, and then this bunch, and then this bunch, and then this bunch, so there's very, very little of any of the rest of the stuff. Now in here there is Parmesan cheese, which is grated and dried, and then there is also flour in the meatballs too, and I can't remember if there's milk.
Down there someplace.
In the Parmesan cheese, one of the ingredients is part skim cow's milk. So we've got a little bit of flour that is not to be used as a thickening agent. Here it was not used as a thickening agent. It was part of what holds the meatballs together. And then we have a little tiny bit of Parmesan cheese, and part of that Parmesan cheese is a little bit of milk. They were so negligible in this whole list of things that I determined that for my family, I felt perfectly comfortable in using the USDA prescribed directions for regular meatballs, which they have regular meatballs. They use just total meat, and this has a few of the other ingredients that I felt safe doing it. Now that you have an explanation of what my thinking was, That gives you a little bit more data to make your own decision. And so some people are going to reject this, and that's just fine. Others are going to say, well, now I understand this better, and so I feel safe about it too. One of the things that Jim and I really hope for all of our viewers is that you have enough information that is not sensational type information, but enough solid, good information with scientific backing that you can make good, informed decisions. Anyway, with a list this long, I'm not concerned about it at all. Now, let's take a look at the canning process itself. First of all, one of the big questions I had when canning these meatballs was, were these frozen when you put them in the jar? No, absolutely they were not. They had already been cooked, and so I knew that I did not need to brown them all around. I could eliminate that step because essentially it was already done. But to follow the USD recommendations to process these for 75 minutes, I was not going to process frozen meatballs. That would throw the processing time all out of kilter. It wouldn't be the same and it wouldn't be safe. These had to be as if I was making them from scratch and I had just browned them all around. And so they were completely thawed and they were room temperature. And then I covered them all with boiling beef broth. Same thing that I would have done had I started with raw hamburger, made meatballs, and then browned them all around. Now, I would like for us to compare the liquid because one person made a comment that I realized that, my goodness, that was a good consideration, good thinking on her part, to say that my concern was that the flour would wash out of the meatballs and thicken the liquid so much that it would not allow proper heat transfer. That was good thinking. So let's take a look at this. How thick is that broth right now compared to how it was when it was very first put in the jar? Is it still liquidy enough? Jim, are you seeing that liquid okay? Is that still liquid enough that heat transfer could have taken place? Well, let's compare that to chicken. Pure chicken, raw packed, all the liquid in here was produced by the chicken itself. It's easier to see than the liquid in the meatballs, but this is very liquidy. Same thing with beef. Now in this beef, you'll notice that I had a little bit of siphoning. Here's a layer of fat, just like there was on the meatballs, and here's the liquid in this beef. So the liquid in here is very liquidy, and even though I have siphoned about a third, maybe a fourth of the liquid, and some of the beef is above the line of the liquid, everything in here is still perfectly good and safe to eat. This is discolored a little bit, but it won't bother us at all. Let's compare the two liquids between the beef and the meatballs. Is that okay? Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
So the liquid in the meatballs is a tiny bit more thick, but it certainly is not so thick that it would impede heat transfer. There's still plenty of liquid pathways all the way through, and remember, that's what we want. We want the liquid because heat transfer works best in a thin liquid like this. Now, the other safety feature that I used, because these were pressure canned, I used the Instant Pot Max. I chose that one on purpose because the Instant Pot Max has an external temperature readout that I could monitor for the entire cooking time. And I noted that the temperature on the inside of the canner, now remember that the lid of the Max and all canners, where the heat thermocouple is right up underneath the lid. And in my previous data that I have collected over numerous processing batches in the Max, when I used my data logger and put the data logger inside a jar in the middle of the food so that I could track the temperature actually in the center of the jar with the food in the jar during the canning process, only deviated from the external readout of the temperature by 1 or 2 degrees. And the whole entire amount of time that it needed to be up in the kill zone, it was at 247. That is fabulous. And if we take 2 degrees off of that, it still would have been 245 in the center of the jars based on my previous data. So I am perfectly confident that these were safely canned. They were up in the kill zone long enough. There is no problem with botulism and no flour washed out to make a very viscous liquid. The meatballs stayed intact, and so everything from my perspective is just fine. I don't expect all of you to follow this just because I say so. I'm giving you my rationale backed by some data, and then every person decides for themselves whether or not they feel like it is safe to can. Now, if you are going to make your own meatballs, then you will want to do something that is very similar to this. Have beef as the majority of the ingredient in your meatballs. If you need to put a little bit of other things in, it is best to choose things that have already been approved by the USDA. If you deviated like I did this time, just make sure that the amounts are so small that they become inconsequential. So I hope that this helps clear up some of the questions. I hope you now have enough information from my perspective to make your own decisions, and that above everything, you need to feel safe about what you do. You need to not just feel safe, you need to be safe. And so use your judgment in terms of whether or not you decide to do these Costco meatballs. As for me, I am very confident that this is safe, and I will not hesitate to do it again. So thank you for letting me come back and make some apologies for not seeing those remarks sooner, and to clear up some of the things that I should have explained at the very beginning. So I appreciate all of you so very much, and I appreciate the respectful way that the questions came in. And keep those questions coming if ever you have a question about anything that we're doing. We love those, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. So thanks, and we'll see you at our next video. Already been approved by the USDA. If you deviated like I did this time, just make sure that the amounts are so small that they become inconsequential. So I hope that this helps clear up some of the questions. I hope you now have enough information from my perspective to make your own decisions, and that above everything, you need to feel safe about what you do. You need to not just feel safe, you need to be safe. And so use your judgment in terms of whether or not you decide to do these Costco meatballs. As for me, I am very confident that this is safe, and I will not hesitate to do it again. So thank you for letting me come back and make some apologies for not seeing those remarks sooner, and to clear up some of the things that I should have explained at the very beginning. So I appreciate all of you so very much, and I appreciate the respectful way that the questions came in. And keep those questions coming if ever you have a question about anything that we're doing. We love those, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. So thanks, and we'll see you at our next video.